Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar, from the latest weather warnings, as we do have a wind warning issued across parts of northern Scotland over the next couple of days, as we are seeing some fairly stormy and unsettled conditions to end November and of course to start December. We'll have a look at the latest UKV, looking at the precipitation and the temperature over the coming days, as we do oscillate between colder and milder sectors. The temperatures will be pretty all over the place, with some pretty cold nights, some frosts to come in places, but some days temperatures will be up into the low to mid-teens, as we do see huge temperature swings between the different colder and milder sectors within these big lows. Of course, a lot of heavy rain will be around, not every day, but most days there'll be a risk at least somewhere. Long range, this very unsettled spell looks like it's going to continue into kind of the first full week of December. But as we progress to around the 8th to 10th of December, as we've highlighted over the past few days, there does look like there will be a little bit of a change. What sort of change we'll see is too difficult to say exactly at this stage. But definitely looks like there will be some higher latitude blocking that will try to influence our weather. How big will that blocking be? Where will it place? That is still yet to be determined, as we continue to see some quite big chopping and changing between the runs. GFS has a little bit of Atlantic ridging, producing a northerly wind by the end of its run. GM has a big area of high pressure towards Svalbard and northern Scandinavia, which could eventually open the door to easterly winds, but at this stage it just kind of halts and sends the jet stream southwards. And the ECMWF has some over the North Pole, not close to us, but positioned in such a spot that really does shift the jet stream southwards, as brings not only stormy conditions to those northern areas, but with direct hits from some of these big storm systems over the top of us. A really quite horrific end to the ECMWF today. And of course we'll summarise it all on the ensembles, which are quite mixed once again today, but that's expected with the up and down conditions over the next week or so, and then the uncertainty into the longer range. So do remember, if you enjoy the videos, do like and subscribe. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see the unsettled conditions starting to arrive at the moment. A bit of lighter rain across southern and eastern areas, heavier rain there further northwards, as we do see these weather fronts moving through. It is introducing some slightly milder air for a time, but it will turn colder once again into the weekend. Now, if you do have a look at the temperatures, going this a little bit later on in the evening, around 10 p.m. this evening, you can see it's much colder across much of mainland Europe, where we've still got the colder air. But you can see the milder air is coming in from the west now, and it is going to be turning much milder over the next few days. If you had a bit of a frosty windscreen over the past couple of days, that will not be a problem over the next sort of Thursday morning, Friday morning, maybe even Saturday morning as well. But then there could be some further frosts through the weekend into the start of next week. But for the time being, as I said, very mild with that westerly flow. Wind warning issued for the far north and west of Scotland. Again, not too unexpected, with these sort of low pressure systems from 4 p.m. on Thursday afternoon until 11 a.m. on Friday for 60 to 70 miles per hour. Likely maybe in excess of 75 in a few spots. So some really strong gusty winds, but again, it's in an area that's not too foreign to these sort of wind speeds this time of year, but still could cause some disruption, and there could be some further wind warnings and maybe rain warnings elsewhere over the coming days, as we are looking at a few pretty lively storm systems. Again, whether they get named, we'll wait and see, but they definitely are looking pretty vicious over the next week or so. Now, if you look at the latest UKV, you can see that rain moving through this evening, and it is clearing up into Thursday morning. It is still, though, going to have a bit of drizzle and lighter rain around through much of Thursday, and still a bit of a weaker weather front further westwards. Cloud, though, on and off drizzle. It will be a fairly miserable day, but it will be fairly mild. Temperatures widely into the double digits. Into Friday, we see that getting swept away, and it does turn slightly colder once again, with a bit of a westerly to northwesterly wind. But it's nothing remarkably cold. A few showers moving in there for Friday, and you can see a pretty vicious area of low pressure, as we just alluded to, arrives there into Saturday with some cold air on the northern edge. There's a risk of a bit of snow within this. It would be mainly caused by evaporative cooling over the higher ground, but you can see a little bit of pinks and purples mixing in there, and a few snow showers across Scotland as some slightly colder air does dig in. But really quite heavy rain there during Saturday, and it does, as I said, look really quite vicious as it moves through. And again, a bit of back edge snow there for the far north of England and southern Scotland. Now then, into Sunday morning, it would be very cold for all as we start to draw in a northerly wind. but this is a temporary northerly wind. This is not a proper northerly flow. It is a northerly wind on the back edge of one of these lows, and then you see very quickly into Monday, another big low arrives, and this is where we start to see the big walls of rain there. A pretty typical start there to the first day of December. Not a particularly wintry or festive theme at all. A bit of snow over the Highlands of Scotland, but most other areas, it's miserable, cold rain. If we look at the upper air temperatures, you can see cold air is getting swept away. Milder air in for now. Cold air starting to return into Friday, but it only really properly arrives there into Saturday with that low clearing, and then it gets pushed away once again there into the start of the new week. If we look at the temperatures, you can see as we head into Thursday, widely into the double digits, maybe even 13 or 14 degrees, very mild indeed. Into Friday, it's a little bit chillier, maybe still double digits in the far south, a little bit colder further north, it's more high single digits. And then into Saturday, that low sweeping through, still mild in the southeast, but much, much colder in the north. And once that clears, we do see potentially pretty widespread frost into Sunday morning for northern and western areas, maybe more variable and regional further eastwards. Into Sunday afternoon, look at that, it's a really cold day. Widely down to close towards freezing there in the north, and further southwards only 4 to 6 degrees. As I said, big temperature swings. Thursday, we're looking at 14 or 15 degrees, here 4 or 5 in the same areas. Harsh frost into Monday morning, but hopefully come sunrise, those temperatures are just nudging above freezing, so hopefully don't really see too much of an issue there with frost or ice. And then into Monday afternoon, look at that, double digits returning once again. So lots of up and down, lots of chopping and changing, as we alluded to. Now, if you look at the longer range, you can see a westerly flow pushing in at the moment. This pretty vicious low moves through over the next couple of days. Once that clears into the weekend, we do see a slight northerly wind for a time. But again, it's nothing ridiculous. It's just going to bring some slightly fresher air in for a couple of days. And then again, more of a westerly flow returning longer range. You can see a little bit of high pressure towards parts of Svalbard and northern Scandinavia, and this does shift the jet stream further southwards. So it's more of a cooler, unsettled or stormy pattern. You see the black line roughly where the jet is. It's just to our south heading into the Bay of Biscay there, and that's why it is slightly fresher, but still unsettled. And then longer range, we see a bit of Atlantic ridging. Again, not cold enough or big enough to produce, a proper colder spell, but it's cold enough and it's, big enough ridge to put in a pretty cold northerly wind for a time there around the 10th, 12th of December. Wouldn't last too long, 2 or 3 days maximum. But this time of year, we've got a lot of cold air with the stratospheric polar vortex displaced towards northern Canada, drawing in some really cold air for a time, but you can see the ridge is not penetrating into the Arctic, so it likely would be flattened by this low, and we would see these milder air masses moving back in. So not expecting anything crazy here, but for the time being, as I said, it's a change. Colder snaps become more possible around the middle of the month as we see more signs of high pressure trying to extend into the Arctic. Here, though, it's more of an Atlantic ridge, not really any proper blocking, but you can see the stratospheric polar vortex is nowhere near as organised on our side of the pole by this point, and you compare it to what we're going to see next week, where we see these blues and purples all succinct, and they start to get kind of pushed away as we do head into the sort of latter part of next week into the following week, as we start to see blocking emerging across the Arctic. We'll just have to wait and see whether that actually results in anything majorly cold for the UK. Is this kind of frame here where the risk is there. If high pressure actually establishes itself towards Greenland here, then we could go very cold and blocked into the lead up to Christmas. But you can see the ridge doesn't hold and gets knocked away very, very quickly. Now, if you compare to the GEM, very similar over the next week or so as expected. And you can see longer range, we do see those ridges towards Scandinavia, but it doesn't really produce anything too crazy other than shifting the jet stream further southwards towards more northern Spain. And what that does is it creates more of a cooler, unsettled pattern. Still milder sectors pushing in, but there's more abundance of cooler airflows coming in from the northwest. So no crazy changes, but it is again potentially evolving to something different into the middle third of the month. You can see, though, if we look out to our north, this area of blue and purple around this high could come in from the east. We'll have to wait and see, but it could. There is a possibility there if this high does get going. Again, it will have a really hard time against these low pressure systems out to our west, but it's a possibility, and that ridge is building in. So one to watch. And if we finish by looking at the ECMWF, as I said, it's very similar, but the change we see longer term, it's no major blocking to our north, but what we do see is kind of similar to the GM with some Atlantic ridging, and what that does is forces these lows incredibly fast south. And look at this, these lows, which are normally towards Iceland and Greenland, are over the top of us and looks pretty vicious to end this run, a really horrific end. And again, if we zoom in, this low down to 952 millibars, that would be a named storm from the looks of this. And if we look at the wind gusts, you can see really quite strong, 70, 80, 90 mile per hour wind gusts, looking pretty ridiculous on that southern flank. And of course, a lot of rain as well. So a pretty vicious end there to the ECMWF as a result of the jet stream shifting southwards. All three runs do have that. The jet stream slowly shifting southwards. So it is a cooling trend. But as I said, we'd need something more than that to actually see anything wintry further into December. Now, if you look at the latest ensembles, you can see very up and down over the next week and beyond, really. Lots of precipitation kind of come in spikes every couple of days as lows pass through. But you can see there's no overwhelmingly mild theme. We thought it was going to be mild a few days ago, but what we've seen is that jet stream shift ever so slightly southwards. The wind's more from a west to northwesterly direction than a west to southwesterly direction, and it just means those temperatures are a couple of degrees cooler on average. We will see milder sectors, as we said, some days into the low teens, but you can see plenty of colder sectors as well. So I think it is going to be a really changeable next couple of weeks. Sea level pressure oscillating up and down, that's in line with those spikes in precipitation and the changes in temperature. Again, it's just warm sectors, cold sectors oscillating between each other with weather fronts in between, producing lots of heavy rain with the changes in pressure as systems clear through. And if we do compare to the ECMWF, it's very similar. Look at that. The ensemble mean is pretty much bang on with the 1991-2020 mean. And the big notable thing is there's not too many deviating either side, at least out towards kind of the 8th of December. Very few are more than 5 degrees above or below average. A pretty strong confidence for a up and down and kind of average start to December with lots of precipitation and potentially some pretty stormy conditions. But again, we'll have to update you on those details nearer the time. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed subscribing new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.